When I look back through my own life, I, well, first of all, was my life always happy? Absolutely not. Um, my childhood was fraught with a great amount of conflict, abuse, and challenges. And so circumstances around me certainly were far from happy in many, many moments and in many ways. So, would you say that you can be happy when you're being bullied, when you are experiencing abuse or conflict in your environment? Well, the interesting thing is that I noticed that there were two different dimensions to my experience or what I was feeling. And what I mean by that is, okay, the circumstances themselves were not set in a way that would ideally create harmony and peace and happiness. And so I really had to work to find ways in my environment to balance out the traumas and the conflicts that were occurring. What I discovered, however, interestingly, because of that, was as long as my focus was fixed outside, then I would be pulled into that disturbed energy and I would really, really feel it because I was actually very grounded in awareness or consciousness. I was really present and connected to everything. So I was acutely sensitive, acutely aware. And so if all my attention went onto the events outside of me, I'd be pulled more and more into that energy. And of course the energy would be very heightened, and being surrounded by anger, pain, grief, abuse, etc. Of course that wasn't very pleasant energy to be in the midst of. Conversely, I noticed that when I was really focusing my attention inwardly, which is what I would do regularly because my environment was so conflicted, I would go sit in nature and I'd take all my attention back into my own inner oasis, which is what I came to call it. That I had my own little oasis inside of me. And I realized that it actually didn't matter what was happening, what abuse occurred, there was this constant calm inside of me. And that actually inside this calm and this pure essence of being, which I didn't know how to describe it as a child, but I certainly was experiencing it, inside of that was a joy, a wonder, a happiness, and a type of happiness that was so pure and free of conditions. It was really beyond description. And I remember one particular event when I used to stay with my grandmother, and she would give us sweet treats and things like that. But of course, I ended up with quite a sweet tooth because of it. And I would crave these sugar cubes. She kept sugar cubes wrapped up in the cupboard. And one afternoon, I was really craving one of these sugar cubes, and I was waiting for a moment when I could get it. Well, the moment was just before bedtime. So I snuck into the kitchen and I grabbed a couple of these little sugar cubes and took them to my room and climbed into bed before my grandmother would come to, tuck us in and say goodnight. And I'm clutching these little sugar cubes in my in my hands under the sheets, just waiting for the moment that she said goodnight and left the room. And for some reason that night she decides to pull back the covers and spread out the sheet to tuck me in a bit more. And she goes, "What's this?" she feels the grains, and at first it looks like she thinks it's sand, and then she goes, "Sugar?" She realizes I've got these sugar cubes in my hand. She grabs my hand and she wrenches it open, and sugar. She gives me a fair old belting across my backside. She'd pull back the sheets fully. I'm there, like it's all cold, and she's absolutely belting my backside. Well, I burst into tears. And I was crying and howling and crying and howling. She left the room, and I'm just there crying. And me is just awareness, watching this. And I'm then acutely aware that I'm this awareness watching this whole thing. And I realise, wow, I'm actually just acting out this crying and this tantrum. And it was so fascinating. It was so curious that I'm just watching the crying and the howling. And because I was so aware of it, all of a sudden I just stopped, and I realised, wow, I am actually this, like a rock that is immovable, unchanged, always at peace, undisturbed by anything that's happening on. That's what I am. And all these other events and activities are just this surface dynamic, a fluctuation of energies, of events coming and going. Now, of course, I'm describing this now as an adult mind, but in essence, I was realizing that as a child. And so it really gave me this profound anchoring to my inner being, that I knew no matter what happened, that oasis, that immovable rock of beingness was inside of me. And I don't mean rock as in, contracted and tight. I mean just steadfast, unshakable, reliable. And so that was the foundation for me, really, for my whole life, was always this recognition that I am that source. I am the peace, the happiness, the joy, the calm. And life is going to be unpredictable. It's going to be unreliable. Things are going to change. There's going to be upheaval. There's going to be disruptions surrounding me. People are angry. People are hurt, wounded. People are conflicted. People do abuse. I was aware of that. Not that I condoned that, not that I resigned myself to it, but that I accepted it.